All right, what's up, everybody? How is everyone doing? Welcome to another video here in the channel. Today, I'm going to teach you why you have shoulder pain whenever you're pressing stuff, dumbbells, barbells, incline, flat bench, overhead press, throwing shit with your shoulder, anything that involves the shoulder joint. It involves pressing. I'm going to teach you guys why exactly pain happens, why it develops, and most importantly, how to fix it. Before we get there, a little bit of a history about myself. If you don't know me, my name is Nicolas Barbosa. I am from São Paulo, Brazil, as you can tell by the shirt. Very big supporter of Brazil in the current Olympic Games. I've spent the last 10 years training myself and the last 5 years learning how to be the best coach possible, learning from the best physiology super nerds in the world how to help active adults play sports pain-free. And I've used the knowledge that I've gained from them to help people like yourself be able to play their favorite sports without pain, without having to worry about injuries, while rehabbing from certain injuries post-operation, anything that involves any sort of pain, difficulty, or any sort of physical limitation that prevents you from doing the things that you want to do the most and love the most. So now that we got the trust part out of the way, let me teach you guys exactly what's going on so that you know exactly how to fix it. The short answer is you're injured and you're hurt because you're weak. And that, of course, is a very simplistic answer that does not tell you a lot. Here's how this works. An injury happens whenever you place too much load in a certain given tissue without that tissue being prepared to receive that load within a given time frame. So the short answer is when load is bigger than the capacity, you have an injury. When the load is less than the physical capacity that you have rehab. And when the loads are progressively increasing close or equal to your physical capacity, then you have prevention, protection. That's when you are training. That's when you're signaling to your body that it needs certain adaptations to be able to sustain whatever it is that you're doing outside of training, because that's what training really is. Training is preparation of your body for a certain task, activity, or sport. And so just a couple examples on the screen that we can go over is a squatter's knee can handle around 300 pounds, but if it gets a 305 pounds load placed on it, you're going to have some sort of ligament tear, some sort of ligament sprain, any sort of knee joint issues. And of course, guys, these are obviously very simplistic examples. You know, it might be the case that you have to squat 305 pounds over and over again for years for you to get to the point where a ligament tear or a sprain happens. But just so you guys understand the concept of load and capacity and injury, there is nothing outside of this equation. It's also very important to note that they may happen within a given time frame. So it may be the case that 45 miles doesn't hurt you today, but 45 miles every day for a week will hurt you on Sunday. Having worked with people that are dealing with pain and injury in sports for the past few years now, I hear all the excuses all the time. It's my age. I do all my mobility work. I do my stretching. I get cupping done. I get massage. I get adjustments. They ask themselves and they ask me, how is it possible that my shoulders are so weak and vulnerable despite me doing all this work to recover and get them healthy and keep them healthy? And my answer is always brought back to the anatomy. Despite this drawing looking like a phallic structure, this is actually the drawing of a joint. I took this picture at one of the seminars that I attended, and it shows exactly how movement works. Here we see all the layers that are responsible for movement. So just to point out a couple structures here. The first one we have is the brain, which is the phallic structure that I was referring to, and the nervous system attaching to it and connecting to all the biological stuff that's throughout the body. Now, what's in the center of that stuff that's over here in the black and the white is the joint capsule. The joint capsule is the deepest layer of a joint. It is the first thing the nervous system encounters whenever it is sending signals down to the body. Because the joint and the nervous system are so close to each other, the joint actually has the best communication with the nervous system, which is funny because the joint tends to be the thing that people train the least despite having the most importance for movement. The second thing we see after that joint is the rotational muscle fibers. These are responsible for shoulder rotation, hip rotation, knee rotation, elbow rotation, which is more known as pronation and supination. After the rotational stuff, we have all the linear stuff. That's the stuff that gets trained usually the most in the gym, which is your elbow flexion, elbow extension, hip flexion, hip extension, hip abduction, hip adduction, all the linear movements. Outside of that layer, we see this green and blue layer of weird stuff around it. That's the movements that are created and are patternized by our body. So this is where you'll find your squats, your bench presses, your shoulder presses, your deadlifts, your baseball pitches, your baseball swings. This is where you find your MMA kicks, uppercuts, anything that involves the combination of this entire structure organizing itself to accomplish a task. This is where that task is. It's outside of our bodies, and it is our body organizing itself, organizing this entire structure that I just named to better accomplish that task. Now, you guys are probably asking yourselves, what the hell are all these colors everywhere? The black stuff is made of collagen. It's the connective tissue fibers there, as opposed to the red, which are all muscle fibers made of all the proteins. Now, as you guys can see here, not only is the joint capsule made of all the black stuff, which is the connective tissue, but we also have connective tissue in between the muscle fibers of the rotational muscle and of the linear muscle. These layers of connective tissue all support the muscular structure. And so really the order of importance for training is joints, connective tissues, and then muscle. And all of those get controlled by the nervous system. So all four of these are training qualities. Now, most people in the gym are only training mostly really their linear muscle and their nervous system. And it is very important to understand that there are structures that we are not training, that we are leaving behind, which is all this connective tissue stuff in between your muscle fibers and the joint itself, which is the most important part for movement quality. So now that we understand that we have four things that we can train, it is important to understand why we need to train them. And the reason we need to train them is because the body is lazy. Whatever does not get trained, does not get stimulated through your nervous system, your body is going to automatically think that it doesn't need to be used anymore. Therefore, your body is going to take it away. Your body doesn't want to spend energy, spend calories maintaining any specific quality that it thinks it's not going to use anymore because it thinks it's useless. And so let's say you don't really train your joints. You have never given a specific training input to your joint capsule. Well, guess what's going to happen to that joint capsule? It's going to lose energy. Your body's going to spend less energy trying to maintain that joint capsule. It's going to lose strength. It's going to lose capacity. Once it loses its capacity, it is more likely that the loads will be higher in the capacity of your specific joint, let's say of your shoulder, and therefore that joint is going to be the part that's going to get injured. Despite your muscles being strong, if you have never given a training input to your joint might get injured. And so I really encourage you to ask yourself this difficult question that's probably going to give you all the answers you're looking for. When was the last time you gave a training input to the rotational connective tissues of your shoulder joint? If it's anything between never to a year, you probably need more of those, and that would be a great place to start. Joint capsules have direct cortical representation in your nervous system, and so it is the best way for your nervous system to communicate to your body is through that joint pathway. The clearer we can make that communication, the better you will move. And this is exactly why most injuries in sports, in weight training, and anything that involves your body happen either at the connective tissue level or at the joint level, because our training is faulty, because there's a hole in the traditional training model, there's a hole in the traditional training systems that leave stuff behind, because linear movements are not enough, because random linear movements are not enough, because your F45 class or your Orange Theory class or your personal trainer doesn't know that you need this very specific input to train this very specific part of your body that is getting left behind. And the more you reinforce that pattern, the more deterioration you enforce. And if these things do not get trained, the problem will continue to get worse and worse. And yes, the cupping is going to help. Yes, the massage is going to help. Yes, the adjustment is going to help. But these are all treating the symptoms of the injury and not the causes. Because to treat the causes, we need the active input of training. We need to signal to the body, hey, stupid, we still need these tissues to work. We still need to increase capacity in these tissues or not lose capacity in these tissues because they are still being used to do our sports. And that is what training really is. This lens is that the traditional training model operates through. It's based on cadaver anatomy. This is the one that creates the faulty perspective and the incomplete programming that leads to pains and injuries during sports and during exercise. And understanding that and internalizing that is crucial in understanding and accepting why your shoulder hurts, despite you doing your stretching and your mobility drills before you train your bench press or before you train your shoulder press or anything else that you do in the gym. Cool, Nick, I understand. But how do we get better? The short answer is you start by training the shoulder. You focus more on training the shoulder joint and the structures around it than you do on training the bench press. So in my opinion, unless the pain is extreme and is anything that is unmanageable, I think we should keep the stimulus of the bench press there. You want to maintain your bench there as much as you can. So usually with my clients, I instruct them to do a deload or maintenance level of work for their bench just to maintain what they currently worked on, or at least 80 or 90% of it. Then we use the additional energy that we're not spending bench pressing on training the shoulder, which is the part of the bench press that's the most faulty. And like I said, the best way to start with the shoulder is with the shoulder joint or the rotational connective tissues, or both, because they are the most likely to be the most undertrained ones. Usually also we start with internal rotation, since internal rotation is the primary movement of every joint of the body except the spine. So if you don't know where to start, shoulder internal rotation training is probably a good place. You can start with something like a shoulder internal rotation pales and rails or shoulder internal rotation ENG, which are both going to bias the connective tissues of the shoulder capsule as well as the rotational connective tissues of the shoulder. And if you also want to sprinkle in something a little bit more muscular based, you can go for a shoulder internal rotation lift off. Step 3, which is the biggest part of them all, is to progressively overload all of these movements that you chose to work on your shoulder with. You can either progress in range of motion, in load, in irradiation, which is how much intensity, how much you squeeze that shoulder tissue. You can progress how many sets you do. You can progress your rest times in between all of these. Find ways to do more than what you did last week. And step number 4 is really to keep that shoulder training at a maintenance once you do start feeling better. It is never the case where you let go of training your shoulder entirely. You are always training your internal capacities in some way, or at least maintaining the ones that you already train. So just to run you guys through an example of what this would look like, let's say you're doing a 5 rep max at around 70 to 72% of your bench press max once a week. You're combining that with shoulder internal rotation pales and rails for the shoulder capsule, as well as internal rotation passive range holds for the rotational muscles and the rotational connective tissues. You can progress the pales and rails by decreasing time of contraction and increasing the intensity of contraction, increasing that irradiation and that squeeze that you're going through in the shoulder. You can progress the passive range hold into a lift off or into a hover, which in this case, you're progressing from an isometric contraction to a concentric contraction, which is more complex. And in order to maintain those qualities, when we reintroduce the bench press or the shoulder press or the dumbbell press back into our weekly routine, we're going to do a loaded shoulder controlled articular rotation, which is going to make use of all these tissues that we are training at the end ranges, which are generally its weakest spots. If we can keep the weakest spots strong, everything else is going to be strong as well. And so we can repeat this process for a period of 4 to 8 weeks, which is generally what we call a training block. And eventually you're going to get to a point where you go through so many training blocks that you're going to end up training all the tissues around that joint. So in the case of the shoulder joint, you're going to be able to train shoulder internal rotation, shoulder external rotation, shoulder extension, shoulder flexion, shoulder abduction, shoulder adduction. You can even go ahead and train the scapula, do your scapular car, scapular retraction, pales and rails, scapular protraction, pales and rails. You can go ahead and train the neck, the T-spine. All these things may be involved with the shoulder. It is impossible to know without me physically going to your house and giving you an assessment which one it is. But I can tell you for certain that if you train all of them throughout a period of a year or 6 months, and you take your time and you are patient with yourself, your shoulder pain will decrease because your functionality will improve and because your tissues that you have never trained before are finally going to get trained and they're finally going to be able to serve their purpose within your anatomy. Once things move well, it is very unlikely that we have pain because we have good functionality. You're going to have good quality tissues to go back to your bench press with, to go back to your shoulder press with, to go back to your pitching, to throwing a football, to running, whatever the hell you want to do with your body. It is important to prepare the tissues that are going to be tasked with accomplishing those tasks in the gym while we train. And before you click off this video, I'm going to plug myself real quick because I do think I provided a lot of value in this video and I can provide a lot more inside my paid program. I am currently in the process of creating a paid school community in which I'm going to help active adults play sports pain-free. I'm currently, let's say, in the beta testing phase of it all, so I'm still testing my waters and testing my market and seeing if you guys are going to be interested in such a product. I think it's insanely high value. We're starting off with around 100 exercises for a very short exercise library that I plan to add exercises to every single week. At some point, we're probably going to have thousands of exercises in that library for every layer of tissue of your entire anatomy, just like I listed in this video. There's going to be a short course teaching you exactly how to use that exercise library to be applied to your specific problems and your specific pain points, plus some additional science content for my nerds out there. I'm also going to be hosting weekly live calls to help you guys with your own training so you guys can come and ask me questions, share with the community what exercises you tried, what you didn't try, giving you my opinion on what programming changes you should be making, as well as execution stuff. Maybe go with your shoulder a little more internally rotated, maybe abduct or adduct a little more. These very specific nitty-gritty things that make a big difference in the long run. If you guys submit training videos of yourself, I'm also going to go weekly in there and review them through Loom and give you my feedback on what I think you should do next, how you can improve the execution of that specific exercise, as well as share some common case studies of people that I help. And I'm also putting together around 10 programs that I'm going to release inside the community that are going to be body part specific, sport specific, or function specific. One of the requests that I got was a Olympic lifting program. Another one was a knee specific program. There's a lot of value in one singular place for you guys, and I hope this serves as a hub to everybody that's looking to stay active, play sports, and do what they love without fear of pain and injury. Proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. Bam Adebayo's mom said that. Let's go. If that sounds good, click the link below. I'll see you there.